Hello everyone. In the previous video we learned how to create customized connection, and we used that skill to create this connection here for the bracing between the strut, two bracing rods and the rafter. Now we will try to do the same connection again, but in a more systematic type of connection from the software, and we will modify it from there. This method here could save you some time, but it's very important that we learn the first method, what we've done, because that would be the ultimate way for creating any kind of connection, even if you don't have any details of that. So after we learn the first method, this second method here may help you just to shorten the process and make it quicker. If I need to connect these three together, including the rafter, what we'll do, we'll go to connection, structure and connection, and we'll choose a connection for bracing with gusset, triple tube brace gusset. It's a long name, but that means I've got three tubes to be connected to a member. Usually they are connected to a column, as you can see here, to a column. Usually they are illustrated to be connected to a column, but we've got three tubes to be connected there. We don't have that exact scenario, but we can modify it from there. So let's choose that option, and as we will see, that will give us a funny shape connection. That's exactly what we were expecting, but that's not what we want. So to start with, to make it easier, let's just select that and make a small selection box so we can make our view smaller to what we need. Okay, so that's what we need to work with. Start with, to modify this connection, as I've said in the previous videos, this function here is not being activated. Having said that, we worked out the issue, and it seems that we have to click on this checkbox here that will allow us to modify the parameters. So please, when you review your previous videos or any kind of connections from this point onwards, since that we know the solution for this, just click on this box here, the check box here, for override by instance, and that will allow you to modify the parameters. So we don't need to create edit type and all of these duplicate and what we used to do before. That will be quicker and easier. So checking that box, going to modify parameters, that will show us the parameters that we can modify. So I usually jump to this here. First of all, I've got the three components here. As you can see, I've got three members connected to the main rafter. In this scenario, this is assumed to be a column in this type of connection. Okay, so three components connected to a column. This is initially what this connection designed for. Okay, so number 1, 2 and 3 are these components here, and that's mainly the rafter. Okay, so it's slightly different than the numbers what you see here. Okay, first of all, as you can see, port layout 1, 2 and 3, it's usually everything is shown for port layout 1, which is usually the center one, and these two are simply following exactly what the center one has. So let's start with, we need them to be different, so let's change them all. The port layouts, we want it to be the opposite way, so we want it to be two ports in this direction, if you remember, and one port only in that direction. So I'll change that. I'm working with port number 1, which is, it should be the center. Let's try and see. Okay, let's look at it from the top, make it easier, maybe change our view to wireframe so we can see exactly what we're dealing with, and go back to modify parameters. To open it, so I'll go to port layout number 1. I will change the ports to be, I need 2 ports in this direction. And when I do that, usually, as you can see, it shows you an error because you chose 2 ports in that direction with 0 intermediate distance. That can't be correct, so we have to give it, as usual, our intermediate distance 70, which is 2.5 diameter of the port for 20 millimeters, and I need 1 port in the other direction. That's it. So now the edge distance in the second direction, it's shown here to be 25. I need to increase it to be 35, which is, as we agreed, will be roughly twice. That will make it 75. Look at that. So that will make it wide enough. Okay, so you can make it if you'd like 40 or 37.5 if you want exactly. wouldn't matter too much. Let's make it 40 if you like. I think that will be more correct. Yep. All right. So that will make the plate slightly larger on both sides. Okay. Now I need to work out on these two different plates, number 2 and number 3. That way I will go to these two. First of all, I'll modify the distance. This is the first thing. As you can see, obviously, everything here is numbered and showing you on the diagram what does it refer to. So distance number 1 is how far this from that point, the width of the rafter in our case. So for number 1, rather than make it just 25 millimeters, let's make it a bit more. So let's say make it 75 millimeters. So to make it stick back a little bit. Okay, great. So now for the other two, let's make them a bit more than 75, obviously. Let's make them 100. Oops, 100. See how that, yeah, that looks good. So we'll stick with that for a minute, and the same thing will go for that one. So they set back, and as usual we agreed there will be 1 port in this direction, 2 ports in that direction, with an intermediate distance of 70. And again the same thing for that, 1 port in that direction, 2 bolts in this direction with an intermediate of 70. Great, let's have a quick look. Okay, so that looks good as we agreed. Let's make those to be 35, 40 to keep it all standard, and that will be 40. That's that. Now I think those, they're sitting back too much. We can bring them forward. Let's make them 75 rather than 100. Yeah, that looks good. And or 50. See how that's gonna look like. Yep, too close. I think I'll stick with 75. Guys, again, it's a visual thing that you can see it looks good. I'll show you in a minute what I'll be doing to adjust everything perfectly. I'll use the center one mainly. This is the important one. I'll make it 125, and that's an important one for me. Sorry, not that one. That'll be the center one, which is, I believe this is to be 75. 2 and 3 75, and that I'll make it maybe 90, just to show you in a minute what I'll be doing. Okay, so that drew the gusset plate, all of those connections. So this is it really, what we can utilize from this connection. We can't do anything else. All what we need to do now, just make sure that we choose the right bolts. We've got these bolts we're going to choose as we agreed, high strength bolts, and the high grade ports, snug type with 2 washers we agreed we're going to use, and that's it, done. 20mm bolts. Close that. What we'll do now, so that's not exactly what we wanted, but the good thing about this connection here, that the difference between this connection and the previous one, if I close this selection box here, go back to the 3D view and show our shaded view. This is our connection. We can simply click on that. By the way, we can do one last change with that by making the gusset plate sitting from below rather than above, so you can see that connection. And on the gusset here, I usually give it a small, as you can see, those are the small distances here, 5mm only on each side, make it more easy. Okay, and the thickness of that plate we agreed, I think 12mm to memory from the previous video. If that wasn't 12, please go and change it. I forgot honestly what was the thickness on the previous video. Okay, regardless, so this is what we've got there. That's closed. Now we've got all of that. If you look at it, this is the connection that we have. What we've got now, the advantage of doing this connection, that I can easily, by closing that selection box and going back to the shaded view, I can just right click on it and propagate, and this is the advantage of doing that. And that simply will go to all locations where we have 2 rods and 1 strut meeting thereafter, and do the same connection, which is good for us because that will give us a good quantity for the bolts and the plates and connection. Yes, the connection is not accurately exactly what we want it to be, but the important part for us here down the track when we work our quantities, at least that will give us the number of bolts, plates, and the rest of them. Okay, so what we can do to create this, because we need one of those later on for details to be accurately drawn. So I can go just to any one of them. For example, let's go to that one, which is all of them are the same. Let's look into it, and again go back to our wireframe. Okay, to start with, to be able to modify it in a more custom way that similar to what we've done before, I have to break it. And when I break it, that will break it into, as you will see now, into a plate, a group of plates and bolts simply, which I can do any kind of modification. For this plate, for example, to modify it properly, what I'll be doing, I'll be deleting all of those here and simply just connecting one line straight from here to there. And to make sure everything is connected correctly, trim and extend. And that's our plate fixed. That's number one. Number two, I'll be deleting those because I don't need them, the two wheels and that cap plate, and I'll be deleting those. Same thing here. I'll be shortening these two rods. So if we go to steel, shorten that by, let's say, 200. See how's that going to work for us. 200 is still too long. Let's make it 350, and that is roughly around where we need it. So let's give it a 350, and they'll do the same here. Steel, shorten to that by 350. Apply. Okay, one last thing. These two plates, by double click on it, or so by double click, or just edit boundary, wherever you choose easier for you. So double click, I find it easier, and I'm just going to make it easier for myself and just do that, and so I can just draw a correct detail for it. And again, I'll be doing that. Now, just to make sure these bolts are connected correctly, let's make sure we've got intermediate distance and I've got a edge distance. I have to have minimum edge distance of 35. Apply. So that has to be fixed. That's at 35 millimeters, and the same thing for that. Edge distance of 35. Sorry, always we choose that for the direction number 1. 35. Look at those when I click on them. They should be in direction number 1, okay, or side number 1. So that showed us that our plate here needs to be larger to provide that correct edge distance. So I'll double click on it, and again we'll do the same what we did before, but rather than I'll just do that and do this, and you see now we stretch it, the plate to work out exactly what we want it, and go OK. And it seems that I have to move this plate a little bit to the back, about here, and I have to move that, shorten. If I select that, let's fix it. So let's make it 20. I think that will be good. What I'll do now, I'll move the plate to set on the edge, the other plate. Done. And one last thing, I have to move that to sit here, and we are done. Again, just selecting these bolts and making sure that edge distance in direction 1 is 35 minimum, and that's it. So if I look at that in 3D view, shaded view, that will show you similar, very similar to the connection that we created previously in a slightly different way. The reason I use this method, as I said, it's not as accurate as the first one. Very important to learn how to create the first method, but at least this will show me, or by creating this will allow me to propagate connection. When we propagate connection, that means that we'll add all the ports and plates for all the similar connections, so we can quantify materials at the end of the project. Alright guys, so if that's is done, and let's just exit that, go back to the wall connection details, exactly similar to what we've done before. I can create this connection between this components, and that will be again tubes with gusset. Where is it? There we go. Check triple tube. Yeah, triple tube, 3 tubes with gusset. Again, I'll go through the same design steps quickly. I'll do them for you so you can see them again. Before I do that, let's isolate this area here so we can see it clearly, and modify parameters, wireframe on the side. Okay, so to start with, first of all, for all the 3 of them, I'll change that to 1 port in this direction and 2 ports in that direction, with an edge distance of with an intermediate distance of 70, we agreed, and an edge distance of 35 and 35. That's important to us. So that's number 1 for the 3 connections. I did it this time, so for the 3 of them to change that, I will make the center one goes back by a larger distance, let's say 100 millimeter, and I think that'll be it for the gusset here. I'll make it 12 millimeter thick, and we agreed 5 millimeters projection on each side. Anyway, you can look at those and see what measurements I'm adding here, guys. You see it obviously. And what else? So we've got that edge distance. Again, let's keep it all minimum edge distances at 35 millimeters for all of them. It's important for us to do that. And I think we are done. The ports, 20 millimeter ports, structural ports, and those snug type with 2 washers, and that's it. We're good to go. So that will be our connection. I'll close that, and again, as usual, first thing first, I'll do a propagate it. That will make all similar areas that've got the same connection, just for the quantities, although this is not the correct connection that I wanted, but that will give me the right quantities. So let's have a look at it. What we'll need now for the connection here, I'll make some minor modifications. So let's have a quick look at this modification. Number 1, I'll be breaking that connection in order to be able to modify it, and I'll be deleting that cap plate. In fact, all these plates here, I'll be deleting them. I wouldn't need them. And that ports, these plates and ports, I don't need them. Got all of those. So shorten that component by, let's say, 100, a bit more than 100. To select the shorten again, tab on it, there we go, and let's make it 125 by, let's make it 130, seems to be good. Oops, 30 by, and the same thing here. This is the one, rather than 300, make it 130. So that goes perfect, looks good. Now one last thing, I need to modify this plate here, get rid of that and all of those. What I'll do, just line from here to there, So what I'll do, I'll move this one here and that one there. Okay, now what we need to do, an important step here, is look at these angles, and we have to understand one important thing. Okay, let me close that selection box. Let's look at it in 3D, this connection here that we are working on. Look at these angles, they don't line up correctly with that plate, so we have to make sure they line up, and especially that they are intersecting here. So let's take this connection here and zoom into it, hide that for a minute, hide that. So to line them up correctly, I'll move this angle slightly this way and that angle slightly that way. Okay, so let's look at them from this side here. Select that. Let's look at them from this side here. So as we agreed, this angle here has to move that way slightly. This angle has to move that way slightly. How much? C. So if how to move them, we will apply a Y offset. Let's say -30. How much is that going to move it? A bit more. So let's continue with that. -35. See how that goes. A bit more. -40. That will create a small gap between them. That's fine. Perfect. Okay. And also for that, now will be -20. Let's say. Perfect. Okay. So that's all. Because if you look at these two now, they are away from each other, which is important for us that they don't intersect together. Now all what we need to do, as usual, what we learned before, steel bolt connection between this and that, enter, and will ask me at what plane. This is the plane, drawing that. This is, well, that's fine, ask me here, it's all good. And I'll go okay. We will choose correct bolts. Importantly, in direction 1 we need them 2, direction 2 we need them 1, and always keep an eye on direction 1 or side 1, what we call it, intermediate distance of 70 minimum and edge distance of 35 minimum. Let's play, and so it looks like they're small 20mm bolts. Okay, that's all we needed. Perfect. Got all of that sorted, and we can do exactly the same for these two. And we're going to steel bolts for this plate, and the angle enter on the face here, so it doesn't show me. That's fine. Rotate this, rotate it, not from here, from there, to be in line here, and just move those slightly. That's the area where we can apply the bolts, apply, do exactly the same. As usual, keep an eye on direction 1. So direction 1 we need 2 bolts, 2 we need 1 bolt only, and direction 1, or the side 1, I keep calling it direction 1, it's called side 1. Side 1 I need an intermediate distance of 70 and an edge distance of 35. Apply, That's all what we needed. Okay, so done. That'll be that, and I'll just guys, I'm saving now. Go back here. Section box and shade it. Let's have a look at our connection. There we go. There you have it. So the two angles are bolted to the same plate which is connecting the strut. Now the advantage of this, as we said, doing that without let's check here, by offsetting these angles. Now if you look at it here, because I offset that angle by 35 millimeters that way and this angle by 20 millimeters this way, so by offsetting this small angle again the same as the top one by 20 millimeters, negative 20. If you look at them, these two angles, they don't intersect anymore. So if we look at them, these two angles here, there's a small gap between them, and that's what we want, because we don't want the two angles to be rubbing against each other. Okay. Alright guys, so I'll leave that with you. Could you please just on your model do all the connections as we agreed. This type of connection here, by doing this type of connection, before you break the connection, if you right click and propagate, that will propagate this connection for all similar locations. So could you please on your model do the connections for all wall and roof bracing.